So, welcome to the first full day of Sesshin, our fall Sesshin. It's great to see so many of you. So the beginning of Sesshin is kind of hard. It's a difficult transition from our real life and the relative world to our Sesshin life and the absolute world. So our hope is that we take the absolute back so that it remains with us. The Diamond Sutra is essentially about teaching the absolute truth. So for those to whom this is new, in Buddhism we talk about relative truths and absolute truth. Relative truth is the truth of you and me, objects, subjects, lots of things, lots of people. We call that a dualistic world, where we're seeing everything from a sense of self. That's our perspective, that we have a self, that it's real, and that it tells us what's true and what's not true. But from the perspective of absolute truth, which is real, the self is an illusion. It doesn't really exist. And if you look, it's really hard to get this in the beginning, but you see the truth of it the more you sit, the more you practice, and the more you study. It becomes clearer and clearer. And the Diamond Sutra is a book of profound wisdom in explaining how it works at deeper and deeper levels. So I was reading both Red Pine's commentaries and Thich Nhat Hanh's commentaries. And both of them say it's a complete mystery when you first sit down to read it. And I have to say that was my own experience. I tried it years ago and I thought, oh, I can't do this. Put it aside. But last year when we started to study it, I got really interested in it, particularly the parts that I didn't understand. Because that's where you really get sucked in. You're like, what is he saying? And it's a segment of the Prajnaparamita Sutra, which there's Prajnaparamita Sutra, which is the Heart Sutra, is also a segment of. There's the Prajnaparamita Sutra of 8,000 lines, of 10,000 lines, of 20,000 lines. It may even be a bigger one. It's the heart of Buddhist teachings. So the Diamond Sutra that cuts through illusion is the full title. Cuts through illusion, and this illusion is the illusion that there is a self. So really begin to penetrate that. There is really no self. Cutting through is important. It brings us across the ocean of suffering to the shore of liberation. That's Thich Nhat Hanh. I like that. But once you cut through this, everything opens up. The notion of a self is a problem. It's so essential to cut through to experience the absolute. And that, I think for most of us, I have to say for me certainly, is an experience that only happens in Sesshin. It's a Sesshin experience. It can be gradual, it can be sudden. Gradually, the boundary between the self and everything else just thins and dissolves. If you look closely at what we call the self, There are just sensations, thoughts, feelings, emotions, memories. Everything's constantly changing. What moment is there a stable I? Andy, what's his name? Oh, sorry. Calls self a verb. It's good to think of it that way. That we don't live, we just self. Everything's changing. Changing. As that boundary thins and begins to fade and evaporate between you and everything else, you have the experience of feeling like you are one with the earth, the sky, the moon, the stars, the oceans, each other. That's a very powerful experience, because then there's no self to protect. You just respond to what's happening around you. And your response is one of wisdom and compassion. They just arise. You want to take care of things. It seems very, very natural. There's no sacrifice involved. There's no self to sacrifice. You're just responding to what's arising in front of you, in your environment. And you even begin to understand that inanimate things, like the radiator, and the lamps, and the plastic stuff, is you too. It all came out of the earth. All came from something, chemicals. So we even take care of all the junk. Maybe it's not all junk, but there's a way in which we are also junk. The garbage, the insects, the destroyers of the junk, the things that eat it, recycle it. The aluminum cans. So once we see this clearly, we really feel it, the one body. We begin to see life as an infinite circle. Life, death, not different, just cycling. It's a cycle. Our fear of death begins to disappear because we think, we fear death because we think we don't know what happens next. We don't know what happens next now. Next is just this, and this, and this. It's just a different adventure. Life is one adventure after another. This Zen trip is a big adventure. It's not an easy one. Adventures are never easy. They stretch you, they frighten you, they find all your rigid places, and you come back changed. We all choose our adventures, I'm not a mountain climber myself. I'm not totally comfortable at heights, actually. So I do Zen adventures. I had lots of them. And they are transformational. So Zen is about life and death. That's really the heart of it. Finding the way to the birthless. Finding the way to the deathless. So today I'm talking about chapter 4 of the Diamond Sutra. Those of us who are giving talks are not giving them in any particular order. I'm doing 4, Hoji's doing 2, you're doing 3, Echo hasn't decided. You could be doing 16. I'm going to do 5 again later in the week. Doesn't really matter, to tell you the truth. It's good when you read it, you understand the flow, but it's very repetitive. It needs to be repetitive because it just gets deeper. So chapter number 4 is about generosity, but true generosity. So those of you who are studying the paramitas know that generosity is one of the paramitas that we study. And I don't start with the absolute version of generosity because there's a part of generosity I need everybody to get before they move to the part I'm going to talk about today. So I start with being generous to yourself. I have very complex reasons for, maybe they're not so complex, but I don't want to explain that in this talk because it will distract me. I just want to mention it for those of you who are working on the paramitas. That generosity is very important. It's very important to learn about being generous to yourself because it makes it easier to let go of that boundary between self and other. It's a very generous place. So true generosity comes out of this one body, the one body of absolute truth. We're not being generous to someone else. We're not being generous to ourselves. When we offer somebody material goods or emotional support or the dharma, that's not a me and a you. That's just kind of flowing. It's what happens when we live. We flow into each other. So I'm flowing into you right now. We're just being ourselves when we're generous. We're responding to a need. I had a client recently who was very upset when she left a session, and I was feeling badly. I didn't feel I'd done my best, and it was troubling me. So I called her and offered her a free session. I just felt like I should have done better. So she came back in about a month later for the free session. She was so grateful and thought I was so generous. And I didn't respond really except to say thank you or whatever at the relative level I responded. But I didn't really feel I was being generous. I had a kind of a knot in myself that I was aware of that felt uncomfortable. And I needed to resolve it. And it wasn't that I was doing it for her or doing it for me. I was just doing it. You know, it was something in that first session that I did not feel comfortable about. I couldn't reach her, and I wanted to do this. And it wasn't, it wasn't not generous. It wasn't ungenerous. It was just what needed to be done. Second session didn't go any better. But it didn't matter. I had done what needed to be done and it was okay. And who knows? People often get stuff out of things that I can't see at the time, but I hear later that, something went better than I thought. I often think of rocks as generous. They're really solid and stable. They offer us a place to sit. They're kind of gifts from the earth. And they're so old. So old. You feel so grounded sitting on a rock. Sometimes they're cold and damp. Sometimes they're warm and hot. Sometimes they're smooth. Sometimes they're rough. Great variety, great beauty. Staggering variety. So the earth is constantly offering us gifts. Very generous earth. fresh water, rain, flowers, shelter. Rocks hold trees, plants in place. They keep landslides from happening. Very important. So, acts of generosity have no giver, no recipient, and no gift. True acts of generosity are every act, if there's no self. Simply a flow of interaction. If you give something in expectation of a thank you or a recognition, like you give a large sum of money to have your name put on a building, for example, it's not an act of generosity, it's a transaction. You bought something. I love the ballet, but now it's called the Lincoln Center, it's called the Cock Center.
Yes, yes.
They're not my favorite people. Oh well. In smaller incidents, a donation must be given because you are moved to give. And it must be accepted because you offered it. Some people have a lot of trouble receiving. That's part of the reason why I like to start with being generous to yourself. Some people really don't like to receive. So if you offer them something, they feel indebted and refuse it. But receiving is very important. It's very important. One of the things that's interesting about fundraising, which most Zen teachers hate, including me, it's a lot of work, but asking for donations actually gives people the opportunity to be generous. And they feel good about it. You know, it's important to have an opportunity to be generous. Which reminds me of the Sanar Wellness Institute. I sent out a little invitation to everybody. Mm-hmm. I'm going to send out more information, but this is a wonderful group in Newark. It's 3 youngish women. I guess they're all in their 30s. 3. They're all bilingual. Only one is really Hispanic, but the other 2 are bilingual. And they have devoted themselves to supporting women who've been trafficked. And the organization has had an interesting history, but they really know about trafficked women. They know everything about what it's like and how it works. And they finally decided that the greatest need, this is not international trafficking, this is American trafficking. These are kids that have been trafficked in the U.S. I mean, there are some, maybe about 30%, that are international, but the ones living in Newark are really Americans. All races. All races. And it's a sad story about how they came to be in their situation. Lots of different stories. If minors, they often get rescued by the police. If Hispanic, they often get locked up in brothels. Well, I don't want to get sidetracked. But in any case, they've run completely out of money and need to raise some money badly. So I'm inviting everybody I know to come to this fundraiser they're having. They're also, if anybody wants to make appetizers for them, they would be very welcome. It's not very far away. I mean, it's close to us. And we could get our own table, and they have great entertainment. And it's a good group to get to know and support. So I'll send out more information about it's an opportunity to be generous. So there are 3 kinds of gifts: material resources, the dharma, And non-fear, it's interesting, Thich Nhat Hanh identifies it as non-fear, and Red Pine identifies it as emotional support. I really like non-fear. So material resources is pretty obvious. If you give away all your material resources, you're working with your own greed. So I'm not suggesting that you do that. But it's interesting to notice that even though we think of ourselves as not particularly greedy, there are a lot of things we hold on to. A certain amount of financial security, a certain amount of comfort and beauty. I've been reading this book written by one of my best friends about this couple, English couple that went to India. He went as an Anglican priest. His name is Murray Rogers, and her name was Mary Rogers. And this was after the war they went. So they were still alive when I didn't know him, but I knew Mary when she knew him. And the story. So I was talking about the Rogers couple. So they chose a life of poverty. Now they both came from upper middle class, wealthy actually families. They both went to Cambridge University, very bright, and but they were very spiritual folks, and Christian, wanted to live a life of Christ. They had 3 kids in India. They sent their kids to school in England, so they essentially raised their kids at a distance. And the kids seemed to have turned out all right, and families survived, but the poverty that they endured was substantial, really substantial. So when we talk about being generous and working with our own greed and giving everything away, they immediately came to mind that people do this. They do. So material resources is one kind of gift. Another kind of gift is the dharma. This is the gift of the dharma, sharing the dharma. And the dharma consists of guidance and instruction. So this is the instruction part. It all kind of flows together. It's kind of hard to say what's guidance and what's instruction. But it is a gift that transforms. It transforms lives. It's amazing to me. And the third kind of gift is emotional support. And the reason I like non-fear is because the gift of the Dharma and opening to this understanding of the Absolute is a gift of non-fear that is right in the Heart Sutra. No fear, therefore no fear. Look for it. I chanted that for my mother when she was dying, not really on her deathbed. And she started out moaning from pain and discomfort and fear. And I got to that part where I said no fear, therefore no fear, and she opened her eyes and she says, "It's true." It wasn't the last thing she said, but it was close. Yeah. So there's merit that accumulates from the practice of generosity. But we must give the merit away. And if we do practice generosity because we want to attain merit, we can't get it. We lose it. Just that objective of attaining something obstructs the ability to attain merit. And in fact, it's not generosity then, because then there's a giver and a recipient and a gift. So merit is really important in Buddhism because it is the very body of the Buddha. Merit is the body of the Buddha, and it's attained through practicing generosity and patience and morality and concentration and wisdom. Those are the paramitas. So glad I got through them without forgetting one. So we attain merit through practicing the paramitas, and that is becoming the Buddha. And we slip in and out of it. And by liberating others. That's how we liberate others. And through liberating others, we liberate ourselves. But only if there are no attachments of any kind, including the liberation itself. So I want to close with a quote from Bodhidharma. You know what, before I do that, I'm going to read this chapter 4. Okay? This is the Buddha speaking to one of his followers called Subhuti. Moreover, Subhuti, when bodhisattvas give a gift, they should not be attached to a thing. When they give a gift, they should not be attached to anything at all. They should not be attached to a sight when they give a gift, nor should they be attached to a sound, a smell, a taste, a touch, or a dharma when they give a gift. Thus, Subhuti, fearless bodhisattvas should give a gift without being attached to the perception of an object. And why? Subhuti, the body of merit of those bodhisattvas who give a gift without being attached is not easy to measure. What do you think, Subhuti? Is the space to the east easy to measure? No, it is not, Bhagavan. The Buddha said, likewise, is the space to the south, to the west, to the north, in between, above, below, or in any of the 10 directions easy to measure? No, it is not, Bhagavan. The Buddha said, so it is, Subhuti. The body of merit of those bodhisattvas who give a gift without being attached is not easy to measure. Thus, Subhuti, those who set forth on the bodhisattva path should give a gift without being attached to the perception of an object. So the space is the one body, the body of the Buddha. Practicing generosity, you are the body of the Buddha. You are the one body. You are the space that's impossible to measure. All right, good thing I copied it down since I can't find it. So this is Bodhidharma. Since what is real includes nothing worth begrudging, we give our bodies, our lives, and our property in charity without regret, without the vanity of giver, gift, or recipient, and without bias or attachment. since what is real includes nothing worth begrudging. That would require a self. We give our bodies, our lives, and our property in charity, without regret, without the vanity of giver, gift, or recipient, and without bias or attachment. Thank you for your attention.